The clink of a wine glass stopped midair. A silence thin as a knife cut straight through the dinner party. Riley. My sister stood up, tugged her boyfriend's hand, and smiled with that knowing, taunting curve on her lips. This is the biggest failure in the Quinn family. Laughter burst out immediately, light as a breeze, but sharp enough to tear my chest open. Adrian set his fork down, a small click, but it extinguished every bit of laughter. Interesting, he said, because the one who needs to take a hard look at herself is not Alara. The entire room shifted. My name is Alara Quinn, and I have lived my whole life in the dim corners of my own house, where the lights from the high Malibu ceiling shined only on Riley, while I stood at the edges of the room, like a shadow no one bothered to name. I was used to picking up the last scraps of food, used to having my words talked over, used to my family's eyes sliding past me as if I were an extra piece of decor. Every family gathering of ours felt the same, Riley standing at the center, smiling radiantly beneath the chandelier lights. While I sat at the far end of the table, listening to the sound of the ocean mixing with the clatter of silverware, a song where my part was always cut out. The salty breeze hit the back of my neck, icy cold. The candlelight shimmered against the wineglass I was gripping until my hand trembled. That night, when my sister thought I would break yet again, they had no idea that the small click of Adrian's fork was only the opening signal for the greatest shift of my entire life. But that night, there was one small detail that made it impossible for me to keep pretending the way I used to. Ever since I was old enough to look straight at the ceiling lights without squinting, I understood in the Quinn household, our roles were pre-assigned. Riley was the light, and I was the shadow that made that light shine brighter. Patrick always said Riley had leadership potential, and I was more practical. But the kind of practicality he meant was holding the door when it jammed, cleaning the living room before his friends came over, fixing Riley's presentation at midnight and leaving it under her name. Helen was gentler, but far more dangerous. She always smiled, placed a hand on my shoulder, and whispered things like, "You're the older sister. You have to understand. You're calmer than Riley. Give her a little more." But that little more, over the years, stretched into everything I ever had. Dinners like the one in Malibu tonight were just the luxury version of the same old pattern. Riley remained the eye of the storm. I still stood far enough away to never make it into the family photo frame. And then, there was one moment that made me realize things weren't just simple favoritism. When I was 15, my school offered a summer arts program. I was chosen first, a rare moment that made me believe I could finally step out of Riley's shadow. The tuition wasn't cheap, but Mom said she could make it work. I remember being so happy I kept the acceptance letter under my pillow. Yet one evening, when I came home from school, Patrick called me into the living room. On the table was the bill for Riley's new dance exam, twice the amount of my program. Patrick pointed at the paper. "Riley needs this opportunity more," I asked. "What about my program?" Helen answered for him. "Elara, you have to be practical. Studying art won't feed you." The next week, the program sent an email reminding me of the payment deadline. I opened my account and saw that the money Mom had promised had disappeared. Riley had new shoes, a new suitcase, and an Instagram post showing she was fully supported by her parents. And I, that afternoon, tore my acceptance letter into tiny pieces in the laundry room. Not because I wanted to give up, but because I understood in this house. Whatever was mine would always become Riley's. But I didn't know. That memory was only the first fragment of a truth I was about to uncover, and it all started from something very small at the Malibu dinner tonight. Before I tell you what happened after those long years, tell me where you're watching this video from. I read every comment just to know you're still here with me. And if you've ever been forced to stand outside the story of your own family, hit like and subscribe because I know that feeling more deeply than you can imagine. Now, back to the year when everything began to slip off its axis. There are memories I thought time had erased, but all it takes is one breath of salty wind, and they rise up as if they never slept. I grew up in a house where the light never fell in the same place twice. Under Patrick and Helen's roof, the light always found Riley first. Every holiday started with my mother whispering gently, "Alara, help out a little." That little always stretched until guests had arrived. Riley had made her entrance, and I was left fixing everything in the background. Patrick often placed a hand on Riley's shoulder, pointing at her as if presenting a masterpiece. This is the future of the Quinn family. I stood behind them, carrying trays of glasses, quietly adjusting what others had messed up. No one taught me to stay at the edge of the room. I learned it myself, because every time I stepped closer, someone pushed me aside, not out of malice, just habit. Helen believed I was more reserved. In truth, she said it to justify Riley being seen while I was taught how to disappear. Once, when I was 8, Riley forgot her speech. Helen turned to me, her eyes soft but sharp as the rim of a crystal glass. "Alara, you have a good memory. You have to remind your sister." I remember standing still, not understanding why someone else's mistake was always my responsibility. From that moment, I learned my first lesson in this house. I was the invisible glue holding everything together so it looked perfect from the outside. At 16, I began drawing seriously. Those first pencil lines on paper made me feel like I finally had a place of my own, somewhere no one could intrude. When my teacher suggested I submit a portfolio to an arts program, I had never felt stronger in my life. But Patrick didn't share that belief. He looked at resumes the way he looked at investment charts. Riley had clear returns medals, photos, dance achievements. I had sketches and the phrase she likes to create. I still remember the day my mother said the sentence that follows me into my worst dreams. "Alara, be realistic. The older child has to be responsible." Responsible for what? For staying silent when my opportunities were renamed, or for standing still so others could climb on my shoulders. The tuition for the arts program turning into Riley's payment, that was only one out of hundreds of times my name vanished from an opportunity. When I asked why, Patrick just frowned. "Riley needs targeted investment. You will be fine." Fine. I've always wondered how many people spend their youth with fine stamped on their forehead like destiny. But there is something I've never told anyone. A memory that still makes my hands go cold. Skyforge began in a cramped, rented room, long before Riley even knew it existed. Adrian and I worked at wobbly wooden desks, warm yellow light spilling across the first sketches I created. The visual tone of Skyforge, the tone everyone later claimed Riley invented, actually started on the night I mixed colors until 3 in the morning, my fingers stained with ink. When Skyforge began taking shape, Riley appeared right when the media spotlight started to hit. My family retold the story as if Riley had pulled me into the company. The truth was, I built half the foundation while Riley was still doing photo shoots for some campaign Helen had personally chosen. Once, I walked past the living room and heard Patrick telling an investor friend, "Riley has a natural artistic eye. She leads the entire studio," while the design file lying right in front of him still had my rushed signature in the bottom corner. That night, Adrian walked past my desk and dropped one quiet sentence. "Alara, I know." When I looked up, he only nodded. No explanation, no pity, just a truth he saw me. The first sign the bills my mother left for me, money she intended for my future, disappeared under a signature I couldn't identify. Riley had a new course the following week. The second sign, the first Skyforge design, the light thread concept that later became the studio's signature, was sent to the media under Riley's name. When I asked, Helen only said, You should be happy our family is being recognized. The third sign, a meeting in front of Patrick. Adrian placed a file on the table and said to him, "This wasn't done by Riley." I didn't get to hear the rest. I was called outside. Just one sentence, but enough to create a small fracture in the family narrative I had been forced to believe my whole life. And on that Malibu night, a tiny detail in a reflected screen aligned those three signs perfectly. For the first time, I saw the whole picture. There are pains that don't need to be spoken. They lie quietly under your skin, breathing in rhythm with you since childhood. My whole life, I was taught how to stand smaller. No one ever said it outright, but every action pushed me toward that designated position. In the Quinn household, the spotlight always turned toward Riley. I learned to step back just so I wouldn't disturb the picture they wanted. Helen often smiled gently and said, "Alara doesn't like crowds." The truth is, no one ever asked. I simply grew used to the fact that no one waited for me to speak. During the years in Malibu, I often saw my shadow reflected faintly on the windows, a tilted posture, always moving aside so someone else could pass. As I grew older, I carried that habit with me into Skyforge. I presented softly. I yielded. I stepped back. Not because I wanted to, but because I thought that was how to make life easier for my family. I remember clearly one night when Skyforge was rushing a deadline. Adrian and I were fixing the final pitch deck. Riley walked in, her eyes lighting up as if she'd just discovered a brand new stage. "I want to try leading this project. You know, to learn." Patrick appeared right behind her, his voice full of pride. "Let Riley handle it. She needs the practice." I should have protected my work, but my hands did what they'd always done. I turned the laptop toward Riley. "If you need anything, just ask me." Adrian looked at me, a quiet, sad gaze, sharper than any reprimand. I felt like I had just cut off a part of myself, only to make everyone else more comfortable. When that pitch was sent out under Riley's name, I wasn't surprised. What hurt was realizing I had made it easier for them to forget me. And then came a moment when I realized, even silence has a voice. That night, Malibu was so still I could hear the waves brushing against the rocks like someone whispering beneath the window. I sat in my workspace, looking at a sketch I'd drawn at 16, two girls standing under a beam of light, but only one of them had a shadow. I never imagined that drawing would become the truth of my life. I used to say I didn't need the spotlight. But when I looked at my hands, the same hands that had done far too much in the dark, I knew it wasn't humility. It was the story my family had written onto me when I was too young to refuse. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. Silence didn't make me stronger. It only made the people who needed to speak louder, even louder. I set the drawing aside. For the first time, I asked myself, if I stepped into the light, who would I lose? Or would I only lose the illusion of a family that never truly existed? The next morning, Skyforge was washed in pale blue light. I opened my laptop out of habit. Everything looked familiar. Until I noticed the Roots folder, the place where I kept the original versions of my earliest concepts, was gone. I searched again. Nothing. I checked the trash. Empty. I opened every storage drive. Still nothing. It was just a small folder. But in that moment, my heart pounded as if my body sensed something, long before my mind understood it. A cold ripple climbed from my wrist up my spine, a warning that my invisibility was no longer a habit. It had become an opportunity for someone to erase anything that belonged to me. I placed my hand on the touchpad. I had never felt my hands shake that much. And right as I tried to steady myself, the corner of the screen flickered. A notification appeared, just one sentence, but enough for me to understand the thing I feared the most had begun. I always thought the scariest thing was being underestimated, until I realized something worse: being erased. That morning, the Skyforge office felt colder than usual. The light from the LED strips reflected on the steel desk, creating sharp, blade-like streaks. I sat down, opened my laptop, trying to convince myself that the missing folder from last night was only a temporary glitch. But when the finder appeared, that empty space was still empty. I opened Recents. Nothing. I opened Search. Still nothing. I checked the cloud drive. The Roots folder hadn't just disappeared from my computer, it was gone from the entire system, as if it had never existed. A cold chill crawled up my spine, not because I had lost files, but because I recognized this feeling. It was identical to the feeling I had at 16, when my tuition became Riley's payment, a clean disappearance. Neat, no one accountable. I inhaled deeply, slow down, check again. The familiar voice inside my head surfaced, the same voice that had taught me my whole life to handle everything alone. I began opening each subsystem one by one. Then I saw something strange. The access permissions on old projects I created, had been changed from owner to contributor. I didn't remember changing anything myself. While I was checking the metadata, there was a soft knock on the doorframe. An intern, the kind who usually avoided eye contact, stood there holding a tablet, as if the device weighed 3 times the heaviness of the morning. Ms. Alara. He glanced around, as if afraid someone might hear. Did you lose access to the first-year projects? I looked straight at him. No. He swallowed, his voice small, like a secret he shouldn't be telling. I saw someone log into your account last night. Around 11:43 p.m. My breath stopped for a beat. I got home at 11:10. I remembered clearly because I stood by the window longer than usual that night. Do you know who it was? He shook his head. I didn't dare look at the name. But there were delete actions and permission changes. He lowered his head, like someone who had just revealed something forbidden. Everything was done very intentionally. I thanked him. He ran off as quickly as he had arrived, leaving no footsteps behind, only a sharp ache in my chest. I opened the first 8 Skyforge projects, the files that made up the visual DNA of the company. Project after project, the owner role had been reassigned. More unsettling, the timestamp updates all fell between 11:40 and 11:50 last night. I clicked into the metadata, last edited by Cole, RR, Quinn system admin. Riley's name appeared on the second line, but I knew this system. The listed name wasn't always the one who directly performed the action. Someone could have used her account, or she could have used someone else's machine, or it was just a smokescreen hiding something else. Do not conclude. Do not assume. I told myself. Yet my hands still trembled. Not because I feared Riley, but because I feared the familiar truth. My whole life, anything that belonged to me could disappear legitimately. I thought I was used to having things taken back, but this time, something felt different. My phone buzzed. Helen Quinn flashed on the screen. I hesitated for a second, then picked up. Sweetheart, don't forget the family dinner tonight. Riley will be announcing something wonderful. Her voice was soft as always, but something a thin coating made it sound cold. I told her I was busy. She replied immediately. Alara, don't make everything dramatic. In a family, everyone has a role. That sentence hit exactly the fracture inside me. A role if my role was to be erased. Then I had performed perfectly for 30 years. I only said, I'll think about it, before she could lecture me. I looked out the window. Outside, The Malibu ocean stretched endlessly, waves crashing against the rocks, as if reminding me not everything that can be erased should be. When I returned to my desk, a file inside the Light Thread project, Skyforge's very first concept lit up yellow. Someone is opening it. I clicked. The system threw an error. Access denied, insufficient permission. Me. Denied access to the design I created. My heart pounded like a drum. I entered the admin panel. The access history appeared 11:41 p.m. owner role, transferred from Alara Quinn to Riley Quinn. 11:44 p.m. file, copied 11:45 p.m. Original file, locked 11:46 p.m. Metadata, edited 11:47 p.m. Alara's permissions reduced 11:48 p.m. Auto deletion traces. All within 7 minutes. Clean, tidy, precise, like a hand practiced in doing this. I felt as if someone was standing right behind me, not with a body, but with intention. And just when I thought I'd hit bottom, an email popped up. Only 3 words appeared on the screen, but they made the whole room tilt like the waves crashing outside the cliff. You should see this. The truth never arrives like thunder. It enters the room with the softest clink of a glass. The Quinn villa sat on the cliffside, where the ocean wind rose carrying a cold, salty sting that cut through skin. The party had already started before I arrived. Warm yellow lights lined the walkway, reflecting off champagne glasses, creating that shimmering glow my family always used to hide their cracks. Riley stood in the middle of the terrace, the center of the VIP crowd, a silver-sheen silk dress, perfectly placed dimples, a smile calibrated to the right angle, the right tilt. From afar, anyone would think she was born to belong to this light. And I stood at the edge of the terrace, where the ocean wind was stronger than the lights. Patrick was telling guests that Riley would be expanding Skyforge's creative authority. Helen adjusted her silk scarf, her gaze scanning quickly to see whether I was disrupting anything. The atmosphere was so familiar I didn't have to think, my body simply folded itself smaller. Like every year. The wine glass in Riley's hand caught the fire from the outdoor heaters. She lifted it high, calling for attention. Before we get to the main announcement, I want to introduce the most special person tonight. I knew who she meant, and it wasn't me. My sister Alara. She turned, her smile sharp as a thin blade. The person who, if not for Skyforge, would probably still be painting in a laundry room. A few guests chuckled softly. Patrick laughed with them. Helen pressed her lips together, as if Riley had gone a bit far, but still let it pass. I set my glass down. No reaction. I was used to it, but someone else wasn't. Adrian. He stood beside Riley, and his hand froze at that sentence. His eyes flicked to me. Not pity, not confusion, but evaluation. I saw it for exactly 1 second, and I knew the room was about to change. And then, a glass touched the table, softly, but enough to extinguish every smile in the room. Adrian set his glass on the side table very lightly, but the sound was sharp enough to slice the ocean wind in half. Everyone turned. Interesting. His voice was even, low, cold. Because if anyone deserves to be named tonight, it isn't Alara. Riley frowned. Adrian, what are you doing? He lifted a hand gently. May I borrow the screen? One of the villa staff turned on the large TV. Adrian opened his iPad, connected it with a single tap. The cold blue light from the screen washed over Riley's face. We're going to talk about the truth. The sentence dropped into the air like a shard of ice. The first slide appeared. Concept Light Thread, version 1.0. Date, created 4 years ago. Created by Alara Quinn. Riley forced a laugh. This is just an old version. Adrian switched slides. Access log, project history. A long table appeared. Timeline entries glowing 11:41 p.m. Owner changed. Alara Quinn. Riley Quinn. 11:44 p.m. File copied to new directory. 11:45 p.m. Original locked. 11:46 p.m. Metadata edited 11:47 p.m. Permissions reduced for Alara Quinn. 11:48 p.m. Auto purge activated. The room went utterly silent. Riley stammered, "No, no, that wasn't me. Someone must have Adrian." The system doesn't change ownership without a command, and the command was issued from the account Riley Quinn. Patrick jumped in, louder than usual. Maybe the system glitched, or it misread. Adrian turned the iPad toward him. Misread. This is a server log, not a school report card. Next slide. Original Skyforge portfolio. First sketches. All signed. E. Quinn. A Villa staff member accidentally hit pause, freezing the image exactly on the glowing signature. Riley's face drained of color. That's just a concept. You can't, Adrian, change the slide again. A photo of the document my aunt sent the money my mother left for me, with the transfer signed by Helen Quinn. Gasps broke through the crowd. Helen opened her mouth, voice trembling slightly. That was years ago. I was trying to do what's best for both of you, Adrian. No. This was the fund for Alara's art program, transferred to Riley's account the same week Riley enrolled in her new course. Patrick stepped forward, red-faced. You're tearing my family apart. Adrian looked at him, unblinking. I'm only returning the truth to the person who deserves it. The final slide appeared. Co-founder registration, Skyforge Studio. Original registered names, Adrian Cole, Alara Quinn. No Riley, no Patrick, no Helen. Whispers surged like rising waves, loud, sharp, crashing straight into Riley. No, no, this can't be real. She stepped back. You're choosing her over me. Adrian looked at Riley as if trying to remember who she used to be. I'm choosing the truth. Then he looked at me. For the first time that night. Calm eyes but filled with something I hardly dared to name respect. And the truth is, Alara is not the one standing outside the light. He exhaled softly. She is the light. No one in the family moved. The ocean kept crashing outside, but suddenly felt one beat farther away. I stood still, feeling my whole body return to itself after years of being submerged. Not revenge, not victory, just being seen. But right when all the light gathered onto me, a voice rose from the end of the table, and Riley's collapse turned out to be only the beginning. When the truth drops, it doesn't explode. It creates a silence no one dares to step into. After Adrian's declaration, the entire villa fell so quiet we could hear the waves crashing beneath the cliff. No one spoke. No one laughed. No one even dared lift their glass again. The warm golden lights that shimmered moments ago now felt harsh, exposing every strained expression on the Quinn relatives' faces. Riley stood in the center of the spotlight, the place she had always felt most confident, but she looked smaller now, like the outline of someone who no longer knew where she belonged. Patrick's eyes darted, searching for someone who could salvage the moment. Helen pulled her silk scarf tighter, her chest rising slightly, a clear sign of someone trying to stay calm while losing ground. The ocean wind blew harder, sweeping across the terrace, making the candles waver. The air felt heavy, like a room whose protective glass had just been shattered. What are you doing this for? Riley's voice trembled, but she still tried to maintain the tone of someone used to giving orders. Adrian looked at her with an unfamiliar expression, no anger, no regret, just clarity. This isn't a stunt. His voice was soft as the wind, but colder than steel. This is the truth. Riley stepped back, her heel hitting the edge of the rug. No, I didn't do anything. Alara always envies me. I didn't respond. I simply looked at her for the first time, not from the position of a shadow. Riley's eyes darted around, searching for someone to take her side. Patrick pressed his lips together, but even he no longer looked certain. Helen touched Riley's hand lightly, whispering, "Sweetheart, calm down. Everyone's watching." That sentence broke Riley for real, not because she was wrong, but because she had lost face. She turned away, wiping a smudge of mascara, as if this collapse harmed her makeup more than her conscience. Patrick stepped forward halfway, his voice carrying the authority that had made me shrink for years. "We are the Quinn family. We settle our issues behind closed doors. There's no need to make a scene." Adrian replied, sharp and concise. "The problem is, you've been doing this behind closed doors for far too long." Helen tried to intervene, to soften the moment. "Alara, honey, I never wanted things to become like this. You know that. I only wanted what's best for both of you." I looked straight into her eyes. "For who?" "Mom." Helen opened her mouth, then closed it. Some questions aren't meant to be answered, only to expose the truth under the lights. Whispers began rising like an underground current. "I can't believe Riley did that. I thought Alara was just an employee. My God, metadata doesn't lie." One relative, trying to appear sympathetic, approached me. "Why? Why didn't you ever say anything?" "Your family is so strict." I only gave a thin smile. People find it easy to act kind when they stand beside the one winning at that moment. A group of guests quietly reached for their coats, using the excuse of leaving early. In reality, they just wanted to slip out before the scandal hit social media. A villa staff member bowed as he passed, his eyes flicking toward Riley with uneasy pity. No one saw her as the star of the evening anymore. I walked toward the center of the terrace, where the lights cast a soft circle around me. No raised voice, no trembling. Just one sentence. I didn't take anything from anyone. I simply stood still and let the truth do the rest. The words fell, deepening the silence. Not a punch, a period. Adrian stood half a step beside me, not shielding, not blocking, just present. A quiet presence, but full of respect. Riley turned back toward me, eyes red. Not anger, not pleading, but the look of someone suddenly seeing the distance between being indulged and being respected. The ocean wind grew stronger as I stepped off the terrace, down the stone path toward the beach. The golden lights behind me flickered like a fading stage. With each step, I felt it clearly. I wasn't walking away from the party. I was walking away from the old version of myself. The waves hitting the rocks below sounded like a silent congratulations. But I didn't know. What waited for me at the bottom of the villa steps that Malibu night would change the way I understood freedom. There are nights when you don't defeat anyone, yet somehow you find yourself. The glass door closed behind me, shutting out every whisper and every searching gaze looking for someone to blame. On the stone steps, the ocean wind slapped against my face, cold but real, unlike the artificial warmth of the party behind me. The golden villa lights faded on my back with each step, like the stage I was never meant to belong to, finally agreeing to go dark. I stopped in the middle of the gravel path and took a long breath. My chest expanded with a rhythm I thought I had lost years ago. No more shrinking, no more calculating every move just to not bother anyone. Only the sound of waves hitting the cliffs, strong, steady, rhythmic, like someone tapping, "Keep going, don't look back." I leaned on the wooden railing, letting the wind whip across my hands. Only then did I realize I had lived my entire life inside the descriptions others had written about me. Patrick called my silence discipline, Helen called my deprivation reasonable sacrifice. Riley called my being overshadowed your place. Tonight, when every mask fell off under the lights, I understood I wasn't incompetent. I had just lived too long in a room where people were used to pushing me to the edge. And I had just stepped out of that room without asking for permission. Footsteps sounded behind me. Adrian stood on the steps, his coat rising slightly in the wind. You okay? His voice was quiet enough for the wind to carry it away. I looked at him without defenses, without having to brace myself. Okay, for the first time. He nodded, staying at a respectful distance, not intruding on this moment, not trying to save me, simply there, as proof that I was not invisible. At the bottom of the slope, the ocean reflected the moon into a thin silver ribbon. I raised my hand, letting the salty wind slip between my fingers. The wind was cold, but my hands were warm. Freedom, it turned out, wasn't running away from someone. It was the moment you understood you have the right to stand anywhere the light touches. I turned back toward the villa one last time. The golden lights flickered softly but grew smaller, like a memory that no longer held power over me. In front of me was the ocean. Behind me was the past. And I stood exactly where a long chapter had just closed. If someone asks where I started again, I'll say from the moment I stopped asking for permission to exist. Sometimes what you need isn't someone clearing a path for you, but the courage to step out of the place that once made you smaller. When I left the villa, the sound of the waves beneath the cliff was louder than every whisper behind me. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was running from anything. I was simply walking toward the life that was mine, a life that didn't need anyone else's definition. The ocean wind was cold, but it no longer made me shrink. It woke me. It told me some chapters have to be closed by your own hand before a new one can open. If you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever been placed second, even when you gave everything until you were exhausted, if you've ever sat at a dinner table, in a room, in a family where you felt like nothing but a shadow, I hope you understand this. You are not invisible. You're just standing in a place where people never learned how to see you. Sometimes leaving isn't betrayal, it's living. Freedom isn't the roar of victory. Freedom is the moment you breathe without asking for permission. It's when you look into the mirror and realize, I don't have to shrink to fit anyone's shape anymore. That Malibu night, I didn't avenge myself against anyone. I simply returned myself to me, in front of me. The ocean glowed under the moonlight. Behind me were the molds I no longer belonged to. If this story made you see a piece of yourself in it, don't forget to like and subscribe so I can share more meaningful and beautiful stories with you. See you in the next story.